Animation moves forward when artists bring new perspectives, concepts, and techniques into productions. To help your production keep up with the most talented artists in our industry, we focused on performance and quality of life improvements in Harmony 25 and Storyboard Pro 25. Improvements to project file sizes mean projects open 3 times faster, playback twice as smoothly, and transfer faster across networks. With the ability to save as a single file, collaboration with your crew is simpler than ever. Artists can adjust opacity and thickness with the pencil line retouch tool. Capture the look and feel of traditional media without compromising adjustability across the ink and paint process. The brand new Breakdown Assistant helps animators set breakdowns between keyframes and adjust which keyframe is favored with fewer clicks. Artists can now import Photoshop brushes directly into Storyboard Pro in Harmony. By keeping brushes consistent, your concept art will better match the final shot. Want to thumbnail your boards without distractions? The quick thumbnailing workflow in Storyboard Pro allows artists to draw thumbs in a grid or transfer your paper thumbnails easily onto the timeline. Need your storyboards and animatics to look more cinematic? The updated effects stacked view brings non-destructive filters to Storyboard Pro. And with quality of life improvements like lockable scene markers or click and drag layer toggling, every part of the process becomes more responsive. Built to give artists like you the best canvas possible. Harmony 25 and Storyboard Pro 25 now available at toonboom.com.
Hello, and welcome to the Collaboratory, the show where Mike Morris improvises an animatic audience, and we learn about the craft of storyboarding along the way. This is an improv art stream that runs on audience suggestions. Mike, what kind of prompts are you looking for from the audience today?
Hey, everybody, welcome back. We're looking for our 3 mainstays. We're looking for a couple of characters, a setting to put them in, and a conflict between them.
Cool. All right, y'all, feel free to jump in with your suggestions. Whatever you type may show up on screen. You have been warned.
Fairly warned.
Yeah. Now, Mike, what kind of prep has gone into? Or are you coming in blind?
Well, we're always going in blind. So
you have nothing in your head. You're ready for whatever, huh?
I'm ready for whatever. So our audience, we try to make sure that they're the rulers of the roost in this particular thing. I mean, in the beginning, for it's almost everything is from our audience. Mm-hmm. It takes a couple minutes sometimes to get going, but that's pretty standard for most live stuff. But would you mind introducing yourself, Casey?
Sure. My name is Casey Crowe. I'm a storyboard artist and director, currently directing on Universal Basic Guys at Bento Box for Fox. Prior to that, I've been storyboarded on shows like Regular Show for Cartoon Network and Star vs. Forces of Evil at Disney. I've worked at Disney Imagineering as an illustrator and storyboarded on a bunch of different commercials and music videos, stuff like that. And then first got into directing on The Great North where I co-directed the pilot for that, and went on to direct Mulligan, where I worked with Mike. Had a great experience working with this awesome guy here. And that's what I've been doing since then. I was recently on a Batman show at Warner Brothers, and then before the show that I'm currently on right now, I was on a show at Titmouse for Amazon called Kevin. That is really cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing that come out. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
So Casey, we talk about storyboarding a lot, but one of the great directors I've worked with, Pete Michaels, talked about the sort of the relationship between being a board artist and being a director. When how you're coming up through the ranks, you start as a revisionist, and then you become a board artist. Yeah. And so you're not just following directions, you're like creating stuff, and then when you become a director, you almost go back to being a revisionist, only with like massive power.
I think there's a lot of truth in that, because like on a day-to-day basis. So right now the show I'm on, my title is consulting director, and so it's above director. We're doing our animation at Princess Bento, which is in Australia, and so me and another guy, Mike Chillian, are going through and like reviewing a lot of stuff. So it's kind of like a supervising position, but so I'm kind of getting my hands on all sorts of stuff. That said, though, when I've been functioning at a pure director capacity, yeah, it's a lot of working rough. Like it tends to be helping people get their boards set up for the sequences they're going to work on. So sometimes doing thumbnails, sometimes a lot of kind of exploring stuff with your board artist before you kick them off on a sequence, sending them off on their way, and then getting the boards back and going through and doing rough, red line drawings. Or like you said, like a revisionist is going through and doing sort of a final pass to polish and give things that final little extra stuff to get it over the line and be ready to the show.
For those who may not be familiar, could you explain what red line drawings are?
Red lines are when when a board artist does their storyboards. I'll get them and then I'll go through them and draw over top of them on another layer and just do chicken scratch kind of drawing of maybe it might even be text, or it might just be like loose redraws of the characters. So it's basically it's the notes to the storyboard artist delivered in a visual fashion, and
drawn in red, just for visibility.
And it's a funny thing. That's like you're saying. The funny thing about being a director is that a lot of the time, I'm not doing a lot of clean drawings. Like most of my, probably 90% of the drawings I do are loose, rough, chicken scratch kind of drawings to either kick off a board artist or to give them notes on their boards. There is some polishing when things come in, but yeah, most of what I do from a day-to-day basis is pretty rough drawings.
Yeah, because it's not really much about so much the final look of the drawing or making it pretty. It's more about getting the ideas across.
Yes.
We do that on this show all the time, especially when it gets towards the end and we're running out of time. The drawings start to devolve over time. There was this really great episode of The Amazing World of Gumball where they do the animation process and they start running out of budget, and so the drawings get progressively down further and further until they're on post-it notes.
Yeah,
it was genius. I love that episode. It was so funny. A little behind the scenes kind of look at stuff, but I think that relationship between what we would consider art, some finished beautiful thing, versus what the storytelling aspect of it. I think, there's just kind of a different frame of mind you have to be in, I think, is,
It is, and it's something that I know when I first started doing storyboards, when I first learned about storyboards, really, it was kind of a surprising thing to me to sort of understand that your job is to tell a story, not to do the prettiest drawings. And and nice drawing definitely helps your storyboards, look better, and helps to sell your boards, because when they look nice, it gets people excited about them. But ultimately, they're blueprints for the story, and the storytelling is what triumphs everything else.
Yeah.
So whether they're scratchy and or beautifully rendered is far less important than whether or not they tell the story in a funny or dramatic or romantic or whatever way it is. And that was one of the things that actually really attracted me to storyboarding in the first place, was the idea that like you were cycling through ideas quickly, you weren't spending a lot of time on one drawing, and that you were telling the story. That was like the coolest thing for me. Because sitting there and like laboring over one drawing for me for like 3 or 4 days is not what I want to be doing. I don't want to be doing matte paintings, you know?
Sure. I mean, even on the animation side, they're talking about in the, pencil and paper days where, somebody like Frank Thomas, who was an amazing artist, would spend 2 or 3 days on one drawing. It's like, oh my gosh, wow, that's a lot. When, you think about like the schedules that we have, especially in television, where everything is working so fast all the time, and you just don't have time to spend on some of those drawings. You have to, I don't know. I feel like you have to be like good at drawing, but the better at drawing you can be, so where the drawing is no longer an issue. It's more about being able to do the performance stuff.
Yes.
So you get the drawing skill out of the way almost, to where you're getting into character performances, character, staging, and art is the secondary to the storytelling. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's about bringing your personality into it and being able to tell this. Like if you're working, I mostly work in comedy, and so if you're working on a comedy show, can you deliver the jokes in a way that communicates their jokes, and B, can you plus them up, and that's, I mean, you have the prettiest drawings in the world, but if the jokes aren't landing, then that's the biggest priority,
Right.
Yeah, and it's funny because I notice it with boards a lot of times. It's like there's a real art to being loose too with them that you start to understand. I think when I first started off like seeing as like these are some amazing boards someone did, and seeing how loose and rough they were, it was like, these look like really rough drawings. But then understanding that there's like a method to the madness, kind of, and that there's a way of working loose that can be effective and that can be that plays well in an animatic, because they have a life to them, and they're not so tied down that like when you watch them they don't feel mechanical. And on some shows like you need to work in that fashion, like it's a production requirement. But I now love watching animatics with really rough really rough board drawings, because it's just they're really lively, and they kind of have a little bit of room for your imagination to fill in some blanks.
I find that sometimes when we watch the animatic versus like the final episode, the final episode feels like kind of stiff, and I'm like, oh man, this was so much funnier in the boards. Maybe because of the snappy timing and stuff, like I feel like in boards that the timing is just so snappy because it's just going from pose to pose, and there's nothing in between. Whereas in the animation part, you have to make sure that there's room for the movement. And so I feel like if you time a board slower, it's better for the animation aspect of it, because the timing's already kind of set down, but it doesn't play in a board very well.
Absolutely.
And so you have to, it's always about, the getting into the editing room and cutting it down and like making it pop, 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 pop. But when you get into animation, you're like, crap, I got no frames to work with. What am I doing?
Yeah, you're much more constrained by the reality of the, like if someone walks across the room, they have to walk across the room at a certain speed and take X number of steps. Whereas in a board, you can be much more loose with that. I think also with a board too, is that like, there's just more personality that comes through in a board, like you can really, a lot of times you can see, me working my board artist, I'll see an animatic and see what board artist it is. And some people have ways of drawing stuff that's just very appealing, and it may be off model or whatever, but like it looks really good. And they do weird, they'll do weird drawings that may not necessarily make it into animation, but they work really good in the animatic. And there's also, I think, the appeal, at least to me anyway, of like something that's not done and imagining what it will be eventually, as opposed to seeing something and recognizing that that's the end product. Because when you see something that you're like kind of like, oh, this is the first step, it's only gonna get better from here, or it's gonna get more fleshed out, your imagination can kind of run wild, and you can get excited about like, this is gonna look so cool when we see final animation, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I remember working with Jackson on Mulligan, and his drawings were, simple but like so effective and good looking. Like it was a really nice board you'd look at, but still all the poses and drawings were there. And I feel like when we're working in digital too, we have a little bit of leeway in that not everything has to be redrawn every single time like it was when we're just boarding on 3-panel paper.
Shout out to Jackson Scooby, by the way, really talented artist. If you guys are watching this right now, look him up on Instagram. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he's great to work with too. Super fun.
Super good dude. Super talented. Just all around thumbs up for that.
And that's not JACKSON, that's JAXON. So it's cool.
Yes, sir. Exactly. Well, Mike, have you've done shows pencil and paper or pen and paper?
Yeah, The Simpsons. So,
okay.
But that was character layout. So we did all of our character layout on pencil and paper.
Okay.
When it first started over there, and that was in 2006, and they were still on animation paper. And to this day, animation paper, a fresh ream of animation paper, is still one of my favorite smells. It's just love it. It's so great.
It smells like Simpsons.
It smells like art to me.
Yeah.
Like it just smells like I don't know, just that it reminds me of being in college, reminds me of being it's growing up and drawing in my bedroom when I was a kid.
Absolutely.
It's so nostalgic for me, and I still keep animation paper on hand just because it's I hardly ever get to sit and draw on it. But
yeah.
Do we have anything coming in from our audience?
A couple take a cruise, and due to horrible weather conditions, the boat takes them to another destination, and they end up stranded on a private island.
Ooh, that's, I guess, some like Island of Dr. Moreau vibes.
Mike, I'm glad you're drawing this and not me. That is a tall order.
All right. So I like that premise. We're going to go with that. I think we need some descriptions of this couple. Are they human? Are they not? Are they, is this an animals thing, or is this a people's thing? What is it? Okay. So I think what we should do, I think, Casey, this calls for a lightning strike as our first panel here.
Okay.
So I'm going to go to my BG layer, and you know what? Let's go back to the stage view, because, working in stage view, I feel like is a little bit more advantageous in a lot of ways. So let's go with this. And then coming up to here, I'm going to duplicate this layer, and we're going to get some lightning striking happening. All right. So sometimes it's good to just do like a little like introductory type. I don't know if introductory is the right word, but just like a small little pose to get things started. Okay, so we've got just a little lightning right here, and you can kind of see the border of the panel.
Just get something on the page so you're not looking at an empty page, right, Mike?
Well, I mean, something that kind of like introduces the motion really well without things having to be like, super. I don't know. I feel like every panel kind of needs an intro and an outro. Mm-hmm. If you have some sort of like major motion happening. And so having just the slightest little bit of something on the page, I feel like makes it play a little bit better.
Yeah. Simon 31 says the couples are not human.
Oh, the couples are not.
We have another story idea from Caitlin Dempsey, I believe it is. A wizard finds it difficult to make friends.
Wizard Island.
There we go. Perfect. Perfect.
Love it. Wizard Island. They're going to Wizard Island. Oh, that's so good. Because after all, Wizard is one of my favorite D&D classes. For those of you who are like me and nerd out when you play fantasy games, Wizard is almost always going to be my preferred choice of character. Although I did spend a good amount of time when we played Curse of Strahd as a cleric, which was also very fun. You know, but I also like, you know, this storytelling aspect of you know, games like D&D. Because it brings in like a huge you kind of have to embody that character, and I feel like it translates a lot into what we do as board artists. Okay, and now we're going to do the lightning trick, which is to I mean, this is kind of like the you know, seizure inducing type thing that so many times happens, but we're going to switch things up a little bit, and I'm going to color this lightning dark, and I'm going to make this a lighter color, not totally white, but we can then flash back and forth between them to get that
you
know, lightning kind of deal. And then we're just going to duplicate those frames, right? So we got, and then after that, we can do like a little bit of an outro to the lightning. And I'm just going to actually, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to copy this panel again and paste it back. And then right here, we're going to do a little bit of a just a ending part of this where the lightning is going to kind of filter through like this. And I've got my fill brush turned on. And we can have some of the lightning kind of dissipate out a bit. You know. You know, there's also a relationship, Casey, I feel like, with storyboards. You have to have a little bit of animation training, I feel like. Otherwise, it sort of doesn't always translate well.
Well, especially in the day. Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to what you were saying earlier about drawing on paper. Paper was much more forgiving for your posing because you weren't seeing, you didn't draw as many panels, right? So since things have shifted into being digital, people pose things out a lot more. And as a result, there's more opportunity to start to animate stuff or start to come close to animating stuff. And if you have those underlying skills as an animator, boy, it's a huge advantage. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I totally feel that. I feel like
we've both seen those sequences where someone like goes overboard and animates a sequence, you know, and it's like every single movement is in there. It's like this is done. It's nice to have that in your tool belt for sure.
All right, then okay. So next, I think we're going to go to a new panel, and we're going to have. I'm just going to keep with this, you know, theme of it being a little bit darker, a little bit more moody, but we're not going to make it like totally, you know, black in the background. You know, absolute night kind of thing. Instead, we're going to do like, you know, our first character here. Let's see what we said, non-human characters, right? So non-human, we need what sort of, are these aliens? Are these animals? Like what do we got? What do we got going on? I think we can start with you know, kind of like
going to Wizard Island, so might say something about that, right?
They're going to Wizard Island. We've got oh, you know what? Maybe instead of clouds or like fog, we might want to do some like rising, like high waters. Oh, let's turn off the fill brush too. We don't need that right now. And I'm gonna use some texture brushes. I mean, maybe it's kind of cheating a little bit, but well, I don't really care.
It's not cheating. Come on.
Let's get something dark here so we can just brush in some texture. And it's not always a great idea to use texture because sometimes it slows the board down. And like you can see, my pen is having kind of a little bit of trouble with lag right now. But that's because it's also calculating a lot of stuff in the program itself. So sometimes it takes just a sec for it to snap into place. Not a big deal, but okay. And then let's do a little bit of this brush here. So we'll add in some other like waterish, textures. And then just some little highlights here and there so we can kind of tell a bit more of what's going on, and I'm going to, for part of this, I'm going to put on the draw behind feature. So all of my things are sort of snapping back on this rim of the water. And again, we're trying to do storytelling drawings here, not particularly pretty drawings. Just enough so we get the idea that this is, a giant water swell.
Enough to get it to read, right, Mike?
Exactly. And then we can put in here. I'm gonna put this layer up here. I'm gonna put this layer on B. Just put like the prow of a boat. Give it more of that boat-ish, look to it in the front. This will be like, one of those cool, like yacht style boats, right? And then one thing we can do too, that's a little, fun storyboard trick when we work with digital, is we can grab all these elements and then I'm just going to flop them. And then we can kind of move them around a little bit. So we get,
hey man, you animated something. How'd you do that?
With the magic of Storyboard Pro. No, it's Storyboard Pro. One of the great things that I feel like Storyboard Pro has to offer is the vector brushes, and so you can just grab all these vectors and just flip them and flop them around, and it makes things a lot easier. Okay, next we're going to have this. I'm going to copy this drawing here, but we're going to
characters can be aliens.
Characters can be aliens.
Simon 31. Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to get rid of this boat right here. And then we're going to have on this A layer, let's move the A layer back down to the bottom. And I'm going to get one of these brushes here. And we're going to have like a big splash of the boat just kind of plowing through the ocean waves. As it like bursts through.
Awesome.
And we'll kind of set that up a little bit and we'll see like the, top of the boat. And having some good, idea of perspective and being able to sort of draw things that you're not necessarily super comfortable drawing all the time. that was like, I've said it on the show before, but that was like my biggest shock when I was, first starting out in professional animation work.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, all right, we need you to draw this car. And like, cars are like my kryptonite, like drawing cars. I've never liked drawing cars and vehicles and all this other stuff that you have to draw just because that's part of the deal. Right.
Oh, absolutely.
And so like
that angles that you might not want to draw it from if you were, if you're left to your own devices and you just draw a car, Mike, versus draw a car as it's jumping across a canyon or something. It's
right. Okay. Then here, so we're gonna have this boat kind of busting through, and I'm gonna come back here and grab some of these other vectors that I've got going on. We're gonna work just a little bit of chicanery. And I'm going to paste this here and just lower it down a little bit and then kind of monkey around with some of this stuff. Another big trick that you can use that I've found is just getting the cutter out. If you got to split up something and just using the cutter and filling things in after the fact. Another great tool that I think it's overlooked is the perspective tool. I mean, I'm sure that you've used it a lot on different shows, just as a quick way to make things work really well.
Yep.
I feel like that's like one of the things that you need to do as a director too, is you have to really work very efficiently. Because you've got to get this stuff done and into editorial. And so having the most efficient working methods then becomes paramount.
Yeah, because when things come across your desk, it's not usually something that you have a lot of time to sort of noodle away with. It's usually something that needs to be done, as soon as possible.
It was due yesterday.
Yeah, you need to get in there and get it, get it ready as fast as possible and have your methodology figured out and be able to, be creative on the fly.
And execute, right? Like
Yep.
You got to execute.
Yep.
All right. So we got this boat and I'm just going to do the, just register it instead of drawing it out like it probably should be drawn out. And then I'm going to just grab this local color here. And then using a draw behind and a fill, I'm just gonna fill that up. So now we've got that space kind of filled up. And then next panel, once it finishes rendering all this stuff. Again, this is why not always. It's a good idea to not always use the textured brushes because sometimes they just take a little while longer to get things done. I'm going to select this and I'm going to flip that and it flipped all the way over. And then we're just going to, again, use some of our tools at our disposal to really sell this idea and use, the inherent movement in something without having to redraw like everything.
Yeah.
But we need to have a little bit of motion in this big splash here. So I'm going to track that by going back and forth between these two panels here. It looks like. There we go. So let's just put some of these right here and we can, make sure that they're going out and then dissipating as our yacht careens downward. So, Casey, I have a question for you. So when you're directing, do you get a lot of like 3D models and stuff that you're having to integrate into boards these days?
No, I think that's probably because it's probably more of an action boards kind of thing. I think that on big action shows, they do a lot more that kind of thing. But where it's really, really dynamic camera work, mostly what I'm doing is kind of three camera setup, sitcom setup. So it's much more traditional.
I Love Lucy type.
Yeah, I was on I've been on, I think, 2 shows that use 3D models. One for backgrounds and one we had them for vehicles, because we had some really complicated vehicles. And so, and honestly, it was really what we would do is we'd take the model, we'd rotate it into the shape we want, in whatever program you had, preview even, and then like screen cap that, and then just do a draw of that in the thumbs or the boards, just so you'd have a good angle from like some car that's jumping and flying through the air, whatever, that if you were trying to just freehand it would be more difficult to do, or would be pretty off model,
Yeah.
But not like I've seen some before. People are like, really using 3D models to move characters through space and interacting with them and stuff. I've never done that. Do you do all of that, Mike?
I have before, but it's usually not something that I'm trying to do a lot of.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it kind of slows things down a little bit in a lot of ways.
Sure,
but the 3D modeling aspect of stuff, I use it quite a bit in my illustration work.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it does tend to save like a good deal of time.
And are you building the 3D models?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I am. I mean, I'm not great at it still, but it is a thing that I can do now.
Good to learn new stuff, for sure.
Always. Okay, I'm gonna make sure that my layers are consistent here too, and so putting things on their proper letter is really important in Storyboard Pro. So A stays on A, B stays on B, and I'm going to grab this, and then we're just gonna make it look like it's coming toward camera a little bit as it's going down into space. So coming down. And maybe but what about an interior of the captain's spot up on here? Let's break some stuff on this thing too, right? I mean, okay. We've gotta have some like parts that are like, we see that this is all broken and busted. You see this thing's like been through some stuff. Like maybe the antenna that was once there is kind of broken. The little satellite dishes and things.
Also getting some scale too, because you see the door and you instantly recognize, the size of this boat.
Yeah. And then we've got like, maybe a couple of things going on here where we see that this boat is like super damaged. And it helps when those damages are in frame. There we go. Put that damage in frame.
Look at that.
So we don't necessarily see it at first. Maybe we should like kind of hint to it here and there and put some, broken stuff. We don't need to really see that until it's getting closer and we can actually kind of, register what that is. And we can have this spot at the helm here. And, in some of the more modern ships, they still have these wheels, but they're not as important as like some of the other navigational tools.
But they do look cool though. So
they do look cool. They look way cooler.
Yeah.
So let's put like a little panel across here. And we'll have it look cool that way. And have our characters in here. And I'm going to put this on a different layer. I'm going to put this on layer C so we have room for all of our characters. And then in the BG, we're just going to get like a little bit lighter of a character of a thing, and we'll just add, a quick little indication of where the cabin is.
Now here, I know we're working on the fly, so this may be your normal sort of methodology, but do you if you were boarding this on your own right now, you're working on a show or whatever, do you do an underdrawing or do you jump right into the drawings?
Depends on the complexity of the drawing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll just jump right in, especially if it's like what we refer to as the vomit pass, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Then I'll just kind of like do whatever just to get something on the page.
Yeah.
And one of the other things too is, have you ever done the pencil test? The pencil test is not necessarily like an animation thing, like where you're watching your frames move. You just grab a pencil, your stylus, and you put it right on the board. And if things are straight up and down, probably not good. Or they're actually parallel. So if they're parallel to your perpendicular pencil, then okay, yeah, probably not the best. You might need to introduce some more dynamics into that. So let's do that, and we'll make this shift, and we'll what they call Dutching the angle, but put the wheel there. All right, and the first look at our characters. So these are aliens, animals, or what do we decide? Aliens, right? Aliens. Okay. I need some alien features. So right now we're just going to rough them in. And let's put in the background, let's put on a secondary panel for like some like sort of navigational things. So we can have this other character here like actively doing something.
Yeah. Excuse me, I need to fix my monitor here. One moment. Stand by.
So we've got humanoid features at the moment, but I'm wondering if, I mean, these are aliens, right? So maybe we should put them in some sort of other type of, I don't know, what kind of things can we do? There's different, I mean, we always think about aliens in a way that like they're based on usually like deep sea creatures, I feel like.
Sure.
You know? So you've got like the predator, you've got like the xenomorphs. Some of those are based on insects or deep sea creatures. Like the pincers of the predator remind me of like a cuttlefish or some of those other
something.
Yeah. So and then you've got of course the tentacles of a octopus or squid or whatever. Famously, they had for Mass Effect the race of people that had like the tentacles coming off their heads. But I'm wondering what we can do here as far as making them relatable but still alien.
Wait, I think we might have a suggestion here.
Oh, what do we got?
Caitlin Dempsey, tentacles for beards.
Tentacles for beards. So we've got Davy Jones.
There we go.
And
it's both alien and I would say very seafaring as well too, right?
Yeah, we've got illithids.
There we go.
From the again going back to D&D. Oh, that could be a problem on Wizard Island. Illithids are usually not the most friendly types of
We're getting some
creatures.
some Cthulhu territory here, I think.
Yeah, we are.
Look at that.
So one other thing too, like when you've got things you've been drawing over, you just need to erase a bunch of stuff. Sometimes it's just easier to get out the cutter tool and just cut away the parts you don't need. And then clean it up after the fact. And then I think for this other character, we'll make that one a female. Have the
Tentacle hair.
Tentacle hair instead. So I think we also need to have tentacle arms for this guy. So, but not necessarily like, I just think we need something else. So we'll do like tentacle fingers, maybe. Just a, Ninja Turtle setup where they got like just the 3.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so this is our basic setup for here. And he, I think, is going to mention of how these earth vessels are so terrible.
Far inferior to what he's used to working with, right?
Yeah. And if we select these 2 layers, we can also just grab a bunch of stuff at the same time. Grab a bunch of this. We don't need some of this other stuff, so you can either shift select it off. I'm just going to opt to reselect this. Change my pivot point. Get rid of some other stuff that I don't need to move, and then just shift this over a little bit. Then going back to my character, just going to be able to adjust the few things that I need to adjust. I could have used the cutter tool on this one too and save myself some time, but yeah, not this time.
Mike, are you also a guy who boards from beginning to end? Are you pretty linear in your boarding, or do you kind of hop around? How do you like to work?
It really depends on what's in a given board. If it's a script, sometimes I'll be like, all right, well, I have a really good idea of what this is going to be, but I'm not quite sure what this part's going to be yet. And so in that way, I feel like I board pretty linearly. Okay. But, it's the same thing in animation. You can kind of do like a pose to pose situation.
Yeah.
Or you can do like a normal kind of like straight ahead type thing. But if I have a particular part that I know this is the idea that I want, generally I'll go with that first and then build it in pieces around. But in this particular stream, since we're going hard and fast, it's hard to do anything but figure it out as you go along.
Yeah.
So he's got this and he's complaining. And then we're going to come over here. The girlfriend or the missus, the mate, the first mate.
First mate. Love it.
We'll give this guy some grit teeth. Maybe even move him You know, one of the little things, Casey, that I find in a lot of these boards is just giving it a little bit of movement makes such a big difference.
Yeah.
Even if it's just subtle like this.
Yeah, it helps keep it alive. You know, it's really easy. You see a lot of scenes that board artists do where they just sort of turn in characters just standing around and just kind of moving their arms and having a conversation. And yeah, it feels stiff, and it's not naturalistic.
No, not at all. All right, and one of the thing that we talk about sometimes is eye lines. You know, I think that as a director, that's probably one of my biggest things that I've seen with people is that their eye lines are off. Do you encounter that quite a bit where characters look like they're not like looking at each other?
All the time, and I see a lot of like cross eyes, and I see, you know, eyes that don't reflect screen direction. The first show that I boarded on in animation, regular show, that was one where like they were really big on the fundamentals, and eye line was something that they wanted to be in there, you know, from the thumbs. Like they wanted you to have that correct and dialed in, and so I had it kind of drilled into me that was an important thing to do. And so I've become very aware of when it's not or not the way that we deem is correct. And yeah, you know, if you haven't worked on a show where that's really important, or worked under someone who really drill that into you, it can be something that you kind of don't really notice quite so much. But once you start to really think about it, it becomes hard to ignore.
Yeah, it really does.
We used to have a crowd of people and they're looking at something off screen, but every single character in that crowd their eyes are looking over here and over here and over here. It's like, no, they're looking at one thing over here. They should all be looking at the same eye line, the same thing over there.
And we'll go to a close-up. Just so we can have her, you know, speaking to him a little bit about an island that she's just found on the navigation. You know, this primitive navigation equipment has found an island. Sometimes for filling in mouths, it's nice just to grab the paint bucket and just pop. Come on. Yeah, there you go.
Are you a big hotkeys guy?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I use a little dial that I can, you know, go through stuff with. But yeah, I hotkey some things, and other things it's just easier to grab it straight from the screen.
Yeah. I have one of those.
Right,
one of the older Cintiqs that has the buttons on it. I've got like my 10 main tools all right there ready to go, so that when you're working, it's really quick to just cycle through.
Oh yeah. You know, and I was introduced to the idea of micro movements a little while ago, probably a couple of years ago now. And since this is a close-up, we're going to put in a little bit of an antic. An antic being the anticipation pose that will proceed into another pose. Again, we can make sure that some of these elements are tracking well by just moving them around a little bit, giving it that extra motion and flair. And then other things we can do sometimes is just add a little bit of a skew and motion. We're not going to give her eyebrows because I don't think she would have eyebrows. And then we'll just give a little bit more of a whoops, we went way far back. That's the hotkeys for you. I have hotkeys set to because Harmony uses F and G to go back and forth between things. So I've started to use F and G on Storyboard Pro. I changed the typical A and F to F and G, so I'm not always having to reconnoiter myself if I go between programs.
Your brain to different programs, yeah.
Exactly. But then I also set D and H on the other side of F and G to switch scenes.
Oh, that's smart.
So kind of like, almost like an editing setup.
Yeah.
So then we're going to go back to this setup here. I'm going to copy this. And then grab this character here. And we can kind of manipulate some of the vectors in here. I'm just going to get rid of some of these. Put these on more of a on model of where she was from the previous one called the hookup. And then I'm also going to kind of change this a little bit and grab all of the elements of this scene. We're just going to turn it a little bit so we can make it feel a bit more like it's working with the eventual motion of her going to be pointing toward Wizard Island. So a couple of things need to happen, and this guy's arm needs to come down.
Yeah, to make space for her arm, right?
Yeah, to make space for her arm. So this has got to come down too, and I can just sort of start deleting some of these different vectors. And if we were spending more time with this, and everything would be on a different layer, and it would have, everything would be behind other stuff. So we could just move and manipulate at will. But in this case, we're not going to do that because we just surely do not have the time. Okay, and he's going to be down like this. And then we're going to have him be like, with his arm way up here. He's just trying to maintain a good course. And then we're going to have her hook up that pose. Of course, chicken scratch drawings.
Chicken scratch, but the fundamentals are all there, though, right? I mean, we can tell what's going on. The perspective makes sense. We can read the character's emotions. The information we need is here.
Put her down right here. Let's skew the body. Well, thanks, Casey. I appreciate that. That's kind of what we're getting at a lot of these storyboard art things, is that we just have to make sure that, again, the drawing is not the issue, right? It's the storytelling. That's the most important thing.
Yep.
And we're going to put her above him really fast in the layering. Move her head forward. Need to raise this eye line too because she's looking out where a window would be. And then let's take this whole deal here and we'll give it that rocking motion. And then we can even change his expression a little bit.
He sees it. Wizard Island.
And let's have them both be right here. Let's just put in the BG first. This is going to be kind of like an over-the-shoulder shot a little bit. So let's grab just this sort of a deal right here. And give it a little bit of something. Make sure that's in frame so we can actually see it. Sometimes just getting just a little bit of perspective in there really helps. All right, then we'll put our characters in. We've got the helmsman here. And we've got our lady right here. And we're just going to do the salt shaker heads for now. Salt shaker heads being kind of like the universal like stand-in, I guess you would say, for like where characters.
It's more than a stick man, you know. There's some depth to it, you know.
Yeah. And then you can come in and kind of after it's placed, just give it a rough something. All right. We'll give just a little hint of his eyeball here. A little bit something on his head so he doesn't look like he's just, you know, just a round, weird, bulbous head for no reason. And then in the BG, we'll just add a little bit of that instrument panel there just for kicks and giggles so we can see that there's, you know, something going on here that's not just nothing. So we'll add a couple of levers and, you know, obviously you'd probably do your research before this would happen, but let's have this sort of a setup right here. So So the whole island looks like one big wizard hat.
Perfect.
And then to drive the point home, a lot of the time, something that I like to do anyway, is just do the draw behind and the fill, and just give that area that is supposed to be like the focal point, just give it a hit of tone. So we have a definite idea of what's really important here. And you can even do that for the characters to a certain degree, right? Is, give them a little bit of tone to emphasize, to add, the emphasis on something that you really want to point out in a meaningful way.
Yeah, it also pushes them closer to the camera, Yes,
for sure. I mean, if we were really to take a lot of time and do this in like the proper layered and cleaned up, final board type situation, like, you'd even probably tone the ceiling here and do some of that other stuff. But like, we've got this, and then I think one of the things that we can do here is add just a little camera move. Just a bit of a drift. And then maybe like a Captain Kirk type shot, where we've got. Let's turn off the draw behind and some of these others.
The big hero shot, right?
Yeah. Then just the hint.
Caitlin says, chicken scratch drawing is the best, most expressive. I agree.
I don't know. There's just something raw about these kind of drawings, and again, it goes back to a lot of hours doing things like gesture drawing, right? I feel like gesture drawing, as opposed to like long form figure studies, is probably one of the best things that board artists can do, just to get that kind of a rhythm in your work that you need to do board stuff.
Yeah, developing that economy of line and understanding, what you have to convey the idea versus, what is sort of extra. All the cross hatching in the world isn't going to save your drawing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Especially if the cross hatching is misplaced.
Especially then.
So, like, just going back and fixing a few of the lines to make sure that things are, working the way that they should. I think that just makes all the difference between, good boards and what I would consider to be great boards. The artistry really is important, but at the same time, the artistry should be so ingrained that it's secondary to the performance of what you're trying to do. Okay, I'm going to take this. Just going to give it a bit of a restage. And then one of the other things that's nice to do for shots like this is just give it a little hit with the perspective brush or perspective tool. Just so we have an added layer of perspective-y goodness. And then, of course, we'll put his hand over here. And then in the background, we'll just put in a basic, just enough background to make sure that we know that they're inside something. And this kind of perspective lines sort of thing is absolutely permissible when we're doing a board like this.
Yeah, let's just really quickly let us know we're in an upshot,
Yes. What do you think about having lightning over Wizard Island?
I think that has to happen, right? Wizard
Yeah,
Island,
I think so too. So we're going to duplicate that, but we're going to get rid of these middle keyframes because that's going to be like, a thing for us right here. So now I've dragged this out, and I'm going to start chopping this up here. So I'm going to go to right click, and I'm going to do split panel at current frame. I've got that set up to be a Q on my keyboard. So then in this case, since we don't have a background that we're working with that's dark, I'm just going to use a little splash of color, not red, but we're going to double click on here, and I'm going to turn it into like a yellow. Actually, maybe even like a blue. So it's we see that it's like super hot. So, boom. I'm going to move this panel in the middle again so we can have that that initial kind of, something just creeping into the board. Oop. Let's go back to this. Again, I pushed the wrong key with those switch scenes to the side. So, and if we want to, we can, get into the lightning effect of it all if we had time. Maybe some sparks flying up here and there, just so we get the dramatic effect of it all.
Yeah.
And this is almost like, wizard confetti. And then one more panel. I'm just going to split that so I don't have to deal with the keyframes, and then draw it out. And then here, I'm just going to get rid of all the blue. So an easy way to do that is just use the select by color tool, and it just selects everything that's blue of that same particular hue. Well, it looks like we need to just to rearrange a couple of panels too. But in Storyboard Pro, super easy. Boom, boom. All right, here we go. Let's do this. We'll duplicate that. And then I think what we need to do is get this guy and have him, brace. Not in blue lines for that one. But I think we can take his head here and bring it forward, enlarging the head a little bit. And we're going to just use a couple of vector tricks to make this really work well. You can do some really great things. Like, I don't know how many times I've done like head turns and stuff just with the vectors alone.
Yep.
And not having to actually do anything with the drawings themselves.
Just nudging eye placement and ear placement and
yeah. And then just redrawing what really needs it. We'll add another. I think we'll do an in-camera move on this one, And we'll just select both of these layers. Well, I don't know, Casey, what's your opinion on that kind of thing? As a director, would you rather have things adjusted at the camera, or would you rather have things adjusted with the drawings themselves? Or is there a combination of both that actually suits you well?
Probably the camera, because it's easier to go back and undo changes, right? Once you do it, if you do it in camera, you're kind of locked into those decisions across multiple panels. But if you have a camera and one of the scenes is not working or whatever, then you just adjust the camera and it can affect multiple panels that way. So it's usually a little bit easier.
So we'll just do a camera move right here and have it zoom in. And if you get really, really fancy with it too, let's go back to our stage view. Another thing that we can do as well is I'm going to get the layer motion tool out here. And I'm going to set my perspective point just a little bit. I'm going to go to home on the keyboard so I can drop in a keyframe. Drop a keyframe right here. See this little button with the KF. And then I'm going to push end. And I'm going to put another keyframe in there. And then I'm going to just make them slightly larger here. So when we go back to our camera view, we see just a little bit of parallax.
Nice.
We can just extend that a little bit. Whoa. And then let's put a new smash cut frame into there. Go back to our stage view, our working view. Whoops. All right, now I think the next thing that we should do is I'm going to get some textured brush out again, and no, not that one. I have a lot of brushes that I use on a fairly recent or regular basis, but I think we can add some, sort of misty, kind of cloudy, foggy thing for a smash cut here. I mean, if we really wanted to, we could put like like a crash symbol or like a crash thing right here.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. Opinion, director?
I want to see where you're going with this. I'm liking the misty clouds. Let's see.
Okay. So we've got some misty clouds. And I'm going to grab these and I'm going to put them on separate layers because I want to be able to move them a little bit. So once they're done calculating, I'm going to cut this. I'm going to put that on layer A. Actually, I'm going to put it on layer B. Then paste it back. I'm going to go back to this thumbs here for my standard storyboard layer setup. Put that on D. And then I'm going to grab A, get a slightly lighter color. And I'm just going to drag that over the entire thing here. Boom. So we've got that. And I'm going to add another one here with white, just to give it some visual contrast between. And then color that in. I find with some of the textured brushes that I'd rather just color them in, because sometimes when you use like the autofill, it kind of creates like a hard edge.
Yeah.
Which we don't necessarily want in that, but and then here I'm going to do another lighter layer back here, which I'm thinking might be better if I darkened it up slightly. There we go. Then we got a nice varied texture. And let's duplicate this. And then have a little bit of layer motion applied to each. Go like this, drop keyframe in the beginning on each layer. Okay, so we've got keyframes all along. And then I'm going to hit end on my keyboard and then drop some more keyframes on each layer just to be efficient and do it all at once. All right, now I have 2 keyframes set and I can start to move these around. You can tell it's working because of the little thing that's dragging out. And then this, I'm going to move down this way. And then this, I'm going to move down this way a little bit. This one, I'm going to move down this way. Up a little bit. And then another thing is I'm going to change the opacity level. I'm going to drop a keyframe on the opacity. Boom. And the opacity keyframes are like way up here by the opacity part of it. So I'm going to go back to home. And the opacity also needs to be set for each layer. And then I'm going to go back to my other keyframes and set these at 20.
Mike,
20, 30.
We have 10 minutes left. Can we run the animatic, please?
No, because I'm not done.
All right. Keep going.
Okay. Sorry, Casey. I know you want to see it. But we have one more thing we got to do. And that is in the back here, we're going to have the crashed vessel. And I'm going to change my pen back to my basic board pen. And we're going to have the vessel just right here, all crashed with rocks and stuff in the background.
Nice.
So we can see some of that. And then I'm going to copy that. So, and then also I'm going to get rid of the keyframes on the opacity. And all of these are just going to be at 10%. Okay, so we've got some stuff in here in this BG. This one I accidentally put at 10. I'm going to put that back at 100. And then we are going to duplicate that panel. And then in the foreground, we're going to have them just getting up from this ordeal. Another thing too, when you're doing your gestures, make sure that you give it good body language. I find that a lot of people sort of cheap out on the body language and they're not showing the slump tiredness, or they're showing, other things that could, denote this idea that, that there's an emotion behind what is going on.
Yeah. Can you read the boards without the dialogue,
Yeah. And we're going to change this so it doesn't look like she's got a black eye.
They did crash though, so it's, it's possible.
Yeah. They're a hardy breed of alien though.
Yeah.
And then they're going to both realize at the same time because we don't have time to do anything else. And we're just going to grab these and just tink them up just a little bit. And we're just going to keep his, we're going to cheat with eyebrows for a hot minute. And then who do we have?
The wizard.
And maybe he's kind of, twiddling around with his beard and his big Gandalf sleeves.
Gotta have the staff.
Gotta have his wizard staff.
Come on.
I mean, as far as, wizards go, you gotta have the staff or at least a wand of some kind, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, ready?
Fantastic.
Do this thing. All right.
Good.
Camera view. Let's go back to the front. It is dark, very dark. But we're going to push Shift M and make it even darker by going to full screen. And then lightning strikes. And we see busting through a huge wave is a big yacht. And it's pouring through. Got, this guy's struggling to maintain. Oh, these stupid human ships are so terrible. It's like, wait, I think I found something. There's an island just that way. And she points. It's like, let's see if I can make it. Oh, and it's, there's Wizard Island. I don't like this, but we have no choice. And then, I think we do need the black frame right there. We need it. We need to go back in black. And then add a small transition. Add transition. Okay. Oh, transition's in the wrong place. Yeah. Split current scene. There we go. Split current scene and then add transition. All right, here we go. So, bam. Then transition to fog. And that fog moves apart, and we see the wrecked ship in the back. And the two Illithid waking up. Where? Oh, and they see a wizard standing there scratching his beard. He said, "You let 3 a day? We don't see many of those around here. But welcome to Wizard Island."
Hey, very nice, Mike.
Hey, we had a little bit of a hitch there in the storytelling, but it needed that black frame.
That was a good call, man. Nice work.
All right, guys.
Well, Mike, thank you for joining us once again for the Collaboratory. Do you have any projects or topics that you would like to draw our attention to?
I just want to draw attention to the fact that Storyboard Pro 25 and Harmony 25 are available for all of you guys now, and there's some really great new features. Check them out on the Toon Boom website. Read about them. There's some real game changers going on in this new version. With each version, it gets better and better. So go for it, guys. Check those out.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you to everyone who joined us for the Collaboratory. If Mike Morris could draw this amazing sequence in 90 minutes, then just think about what you could draw in 3 weeks. You can download a 21-day trial of Storyboard Pro from our website at toonboom.com and find free video tutorials at learn.toonboom.com. And if you're looking for more interviews, be sure to visit blog.toonboom.com for articles about storyboarding, animation, and 2D games. Until next time, Mike, it's been a pleasure, man.
Always, Casey.
Thanks, sir.
Bye.